Good morning, and thank you for joining INSA's Coffee and Conversation series featuring Margaret Augustine. Now please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Good morning, and welcome to Tuesday Coffee and Conversation. Thank you for joining us. We are pleased to welcome one of our community's top leaders to the program. I am well caffeinated and looking forward to this discussion with Margaret Augustine. But before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. Please submit your questions to the Q&A portal on the right side of the screen. You're welcome to include both your name and organization if you choose. We have over 500 virtual attendees for today's program, and we are pleased to welcome members of the press as well. As a reminder, this program is on the record and the recording will be available later this week on our website. And finally, we could not deliver this kind of expert insight without the support of our sponsors. I am pleased to welcome Barbara Haynes-Parmalee, Vice President, National Intelligence Solutions Division for Mantech, and she will introduce our speaker today. Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. INSA has done an outstanding job serving government and industry during these challenging times. And like so many who support the IC, Mantech is very pleased to have a role in this effort. This is not the first time that Mantech has had the pleasure of introducing today's guest speaker, Margaret Augustine, at an INSA event. Back in September of 2018, our chairman, Kevin Phillips, hosted an INSA panel titled Improving Acquisition Strategy, where Margaret spoke as a panelist. Although 2018 sounds like ancient history, Kevin's very first question was, what are the conditions under which government will shift from conventional butts and seats support to outcomes-based solutions? The answer might have special meaning today after more than a year of living and working in a pandemic. I'm confident Margaret will provide excellent insights into this and many other issues this morning. As you know, she is the CIA's procurement executive responsible for overseeing the agency's acquisitions workforce, policies, and execution. Margaret has served in numerous senior acquisition positions, including contracting officer in communications, analysis, research, and development, responsible for executing innumerable major programs. She directed the agency's newly formed CIO IT acquisition strategy function, a position created expressly to implement innovative acquisition strategies that augment the CIA's IT strength and activities. Prior to her groundbreaking work at the CIA, she managed enterprise-wide business operations for the NRO, supporting customers worldwide. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you very much.
So Margaret, as the Senior Procurement Executive there at CIA, in this role, can you talk a little bit about that agency's acquisition workforce, your policies and execution, and expand a little bit on your responsibilities?
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity to address INSA. I am a huge proponent and advocate of the industry partners across the community, so I really welcome this opportunity to engage this morning. My responsibilities as procurement executive, as you mentioned, are very broad, from execution to policy to workforce development. The CIA is very unique in that our contracting officers are responsible really for cradle to grave acquisitions, support, and a portfolio. So that means all the way from being a business advisor to forming acquisition strategies with our mission components, to managing government furnished property for auditability, all the way to contract settlements and everything in between, Suzanne. It is quite a heavy lift for our acquisition cadre. And to that end, in my role of procurement executive, looking at policies to streamline, to affect acquisitions at the speed of mission, and not only tactically, but to also focus on strategic. So not too long ago, actually time flies with the year of the pandemic, we, for the first time, established a strategic framework for acquisitions within the agency. And the framework has 5 pillars to it. And I know many of your members have heard me talk about our strategic framework, only because I emphasize that as it is a roadmap for us to continue to look at new innovative approaches to how we support the agency through acquisitions, an ever-growing portfolio and ever-growing critical to mission responsiveness. Within those 5 pillars, I just want to highlight them for you because I think many of your questions may fall along those pillars. And first and foremost is to build value, retain, reward a high-performing acquisitions workforce. What I mean by that is not only our 1102s, but our acquisition workforce, big A, to include COTRs, cores, program managers, resource officers, anybody actually who touches the acquisition process. Everybody needs to be skilled, trained, have the right knowledge to make sure that we can deliver acquisitions in a timely manner. So that is first and foremost is developing that workforce and training them appropriately. Secondly, our second pillar is partnering with mission components on key acquisition initiatives. We have a number of initiatives underway. I think you'll touch on them and in your questions. But that partnership with our directorates and our mission components is very critical for us to be able to execute, again, in a timely manner. Our third pillar is building and enhancing our acquisition infrastructure. That includes technology, that includes processes and procedures, again, to make sure that we're keeping up to date and can move out quickly with innovative solutions and creative ideas across the board. Fourth is to drive greater cost and schedule efficiencies in the execution of CIA programs. So where we are embedded with our components and a somewhat stovepiped, we are looking more enterprise, reducing redundancies, looking at efficiencies. Again, that helps with speed and leveraging what's already in place, not reinventing every single time we need to execute a contract. And lastly is expanding the agency's industry base, continuing to look at the market, who has the creative ideas and solutions that we need. One of the director's priorities is technology, and so we know that there are unique capabilities out there that we have not even tapped into. So that partnership with the industry base is critical for us to maintain state of the art and be able to be responsive.
Thank you. It's good to get kind of that overarching strategic plan for the agency. So we talked a little bit earlier, INSA is hosting an 8A showcase on June 8th and 9th. We had probably 80 applicants, which was a phenomenal number for a first time event. And so I wanted to ask you what you all are doing to collaborate with small businesses, as well as, even narrowing it down to 8A businesses there at the agency.
Yes, surprisingly, a significant percentage of our active contract portfolio is already with small businesses. We're very proud of that. But having said that, we are constantly looking at, as I mentioned, Pillar 5, expanding our industry base. And so we hold industry days, we hold one-on-ones. We started a couple years ago having what we call industry partner exchanges, where we invite small businesses to attend. And in fact, your question is so timely. On Friday, we are actually hosting what we're calling Emerging Business Day. and I believe we have over 200 registrants already, particularly focused on those companies who would like to do business with the agency, who have not had the opportunity to do business and better understand how to get their foot in the door. So we are very, very excited about that opportunity coming up. We hold those constantly, always looking to, again, outreach with industry and invite them in for one-on-one capabilities.
So is there a way emerging companies can sign up for future sessions, or is it invitation only? How do they learn a little, how do companies that are tuning in today learn a little more about that process?
Yes, so right now our mechanism for communicating with industry is through our colleague organization, the NRO ARC.
Okay.
There is a unclassified level where we have posted and advertised the event, and so anyone with access to the ARC will be able to register and send in their information. For anybody else who doesn't have access to the ARC, I'm going to be bold and put out my email address.
Wow. Okay.
Out there, which is MAR, G as in George, A, V as in Victor, A, @ucia.gov.
Thank you. That is bold, and we appreciate that. So obviously the event on Friday is virtual, but I would assume as time moves on, we hope, it will get, it will transition to an in-person format for folks to participate in.
Yes, that's correct.
So along those lines of pandemic and virtual, how has the pandemic affected the CIA's acquisition and procurement activities? Can you explain the impact that it's had on the work there?
From the very beginning, Suzanne, of the pandemic over a year ago, March, CIA and particularly the acquisitions portfolio, we were very forward-leaning from the get-go. We looked at how to reduce the classification so that work could be done in other locations. We looked at changing the type of contract where perhaps we may have been heavy on level of effort to change that to be more of a deliverable, again, where work could be done off-site. And we also looked at work from home type of opportunities for industry to take advantage of. So we tried to introduce flexibility to continue mission to be done. Where that couldn't be done, of course, the CARES Act was a quick and heavy lift for us, but we were able to implement it, I think, in record time. But really, we had alternating weeks with our acquisitions workforce. We tried to keep pace, and I think we did a fairly good job at that. One indication of that is we actually awarded the C2E cloud contract ahead of schedule during the pandemic. So while there was some administrative functions that were probably put on the back burner, where contracts and mission needed to be executed, our folks were there to do it. And kudos to our industry partners who are also in lockstep with us and reporting when we needed them to do that.
And the feedback I've heard from our private sector members is very similar to what you've shared with us. So kudos to you all as we've all learned to operate in this new normal. Along the lines of the private sector, what can you tell us about ongoing acquisition efforts in general, not just small business and 8A? Are there any new innovations that you're excited about rolling out in the coming months?
Well, one of the new initiatives, particularly in my portfolio, is the first ever, I believe, probably in the intelligence community, is what we're calling at the acquisition lifecycle management system. This is going to be an end-to-end data repository for everything acquisitions. And key to that is going to be electronic interface And so the goal, hopefully, eventually will be to go paperless. Wouldn't that be amazing to be in the contracting world and not have papers everywhere, and so, or documents. And so this ALM is, we awarded that contract also during the pandemic. We're very excited about that. And it will incorporate requirements definition all the way to source selection type of information, type of work that industry partners are performing for us so that we can be able to share and leverage and analyze that data. We're very, very excited about that initiative that is within our own portfolio. Within the CIA at large, as I mentioned before, a lot of focus on technology. We need the greatest and latest state-of-the-art to be introduced and provided to us. So we're looking at those type of capabilities, working with our mission partners to leverage that and, you know, offer solutions to the old ways we've been doing business. The agency is very, very excited about those type of activities. And I think lastly, you know, a focus that is on everybody's radar, I would assume, is supply chain management. Yes. And, you know, how do we do that smarter and reduce the vulnerabilities that may be introduced or threats?
Well, that is encouraging. I think we have a lot to look forward to in the coming months on so many different levels.
Indeed.
So, Sam Cottrell asked that, he says, thank you for joining us today. And he says, we've been hearing about gray magic at various forums and are interested in learning more about the future of the project and its role in doing business with the agency. Can you share a little bit with our over 500 virtual attendees about gray magic?
So gray magic is one of something that is near and dear to me, as Sam well knows. Our communications with industry at the classified level is through secure fax machines. So in this day and age, embarrassingly, we probably would see fax machines in the Smithsonian. And so gray magic is an opportunity for us to communicate with industry securely at the secret level. We are very, very excited about rolling that out. We have close to 100 vendors, if not more, signed up and online. We're adopting it across our agency, not only from an acquisitions function, but security is looking at adopting gray magic. Other functions across the agency are excited about gray magic to include everything from travel processing. So it is, we can finally say goodbye to the secure fax machines that will be decommissioned in August and start using a secure means of communication with industry.
Well, that is very encouraging. I no offense to the fax machine manufacturers of the world, but I'm looking forward to that across the board. So Vivian Wilson says, adversaries must be continually trying to penetrate the supply chains of things the CIA purchases. We talked a little bit earlier about supply chains. How does CIA evaluate the supply chain security of its vendors and the integrity of the things that you all buy?
A few years ago, recognizing the vulnerabilities, as I mentioned, to supply chain, the agency was very, again, forward-leaning in identifying how are we going to tackle those type of potential threats, and established the Supply Chain Risks Program Management Office. The Supply Chain Risk Program Management Office works very closely with my organization, our procurement officers, in reviewing the supply chain for almost every procurement. They're not a hindrance to our process. They're a partner with us. And where new commodities, new technologies, new processes, new purchasing avenues are being executed, We work very closely with the supply chain for them to do the proper vetting and due diligence. They do report suspicious or vulnerabilities and then identify what are the mitigations for us to either proceed or maybe go to plan B. So it is, again, a great and close partnership in working with that program office, and they are growing just because of the demands that is on their plates.
That's encouraging. So going back to, we talked a little bit about small businesses and 8As and large primes, but Laura Thomas with Cold Quanta asked, how does the agency find innovative vendors, not big primes, with cleared personnel, but no facility clearances or access to the ArcNet?
So usually we hear about small companies through that are currently subcontractors, but we also learn about companies that may not have access to the ARC via our market surveys prior to pulling together a source selection or competition. We do very robust market surveys and again, look across the landscape and the market, attending Gartner Group symposiums and various conferences and trade shows to look for those type of capabilities that could meet our needs. So sometimes the easiest way is through subcontracts, but not always. Again, those introductions and inviting those capability briefings to come into the agency and showcase their abilities.
Great. So going back to, the remote work and some of the flexibility that we have uncovered during the pandemic, Gabriel Alex at Applied Insight wants to know if you see remote development activities continuing in a post-COVID world across current and future contracts.
I think, Suzanne, that was, if we could call anything a silver lining during the pandemic, perhaps that was one of them, of forcing us to think differently than the way we've always been accustomed to doing business. And remote work was one of them. In fact, in my office, we piloted a remote work opportunity, and the results were absolutely astounding and successful. And so I think that paved the way to what other functions can we do in a remote work type of environment. The agency is looking at that, quite honestly, and we are going to expand that within acquisitions as well. And so again, the opportunity to think differently and not the way we've always done it.
Yeah, it certainly presented that opportunity for all of us. Would have preferred it happened in a different manner than how we had to approach this, but there have been some good best practices, I think, that have come of this. So we talked earlier about some of the student questions we've been receiving from all over the country, which, as anybody who's tuned in before knows how much I love that. We've got Rachel Cunningham from the Syracuse Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. Rachel wants to know, does the CIA's Scientific Intelligence Division share procurement priorities and systems with DARPA, or are they separate?
So our Science and Technology Directorate, our S&T, we absolutely partner with DARPA and IARPA on R&D type of activities between both organizations. We may send our requirements to IARPA and DARPA, but they may send some of their interests to us as well and leverage maybe something that we're already doing. So we absolutely share that knowledge and practices, yes.
So I'm going to change things up a little bit with this question and focus on you.
Okay.
Charlotte Johnson at Tuskegee University ICCAE in Montgomery, Alabama, wants to know what qualitative and technical skills you utilize as a procurement officer. Great question.
That is so interesting. So I will say that my background is actually marketing and management and an MBA. However, one of the key roles of our acquisitions officers, and me as well, as I was assigned to components and contracting components supporting mission, we actually integrate our officers into the program offices. And not technical by nature, but by osmosis, and actually learning the programs and working closely with our technical folks to learn the intricacies. What better way to be able to support our customer components than to learn what their program is all about. And so we encourage that. For me personally, in my bio, I was in the R&D area of the agency as a contracting officer, and it was one of the best experiences I ever had. Again, working really, really closely. Back in the day, nanotechnology was the greatest thing. And just to understand how nanotechnology was helping the agency's mission and advance it was amazing. So our portfolio is all the way, again, from food services to force protection and everything in between in the science and technology area. And our contracting officers really pride themselves about being integrated into those programs and learning the technical nature of it.
So even liberal arts majors can be
Absolutely.
R&D and nanotechnology. So Marcel Lettra with Lockheed Martin asked, how do you balance keeping an arm's length from industry with the need to forge deep relationships with industry as well?
Well, the integrity of the agency's procurement process is first and foremost. And that doesn't, however, prevent us from actively engaging with industry. We learn from industry, we share best practices, they learn, industry learns from us. That was one of the impetus of our industry partner exchanges. Our young contracting officers benefit from understanding how industry makes decisions. We've talked about in various forums, bid, no bid decisions, mergers and acquisitions, what goes into award fee. The topics are broad and vast. And so that doesn't prevent us, those engagements. Clearly, we do keep that arm's length, and protecting the integrity is, again, first and foremost, but we actively and welcome the opportunity to learn and engage with industry.
So here's a question along the same lines, but it's more about partnerships with other IC agencies versus the private sector. Where does the agency stand in comparison to other IC members and their procurement processes? Is there a gold standard agency in the IC? This isn't a trick.
I love that question. I love my IC partners across the community. We meet regularly and talk about what everybody is doing. CARES Act was one of the things where we shared information on implementation. Of course, I would like to say that the CIA is the gold standard, but I certainly don't want to take away from all the great things that our sister organizations are also doing.
Well said. So this is again about relationships. This is going back to private sector, but Tomes Toyama asked, how can you build inroads with critical private sector firms that culturally or ethically don't desire a public relationship? It's a tough one.
So it depends on actually what the procurement is, Suzanne, and the acquisition. There are some vendors who do not want to publicly acknowledge doing business with the agency. We respect that. If it is a capability that we are seeking, or would help us, again, advance our mission, there are ways to protect that. In fact, many of our directorates, as you can imagine, in the classified world, work with vendors that are not known.
So this is related back to private sector. Jim Mast at Leidos wants to know what happened to the strategic vendor management program. He says it was always so useful and authoritative on upcoming procurements, and he thanks you for your time today.
My greetings to Jim. It's great to know that he has dialed in. The strategic vendor management program was supporting two of our directorates, our DDI, Directorate of Digital Innovation, and also our Directorate of Support. And we've had some changes in those directorates. And so it's not that SVM has gone away, but against that fifth pillar, we're really looking to expand our strategic vendor management interactions. So more to come, Jim, and we'll make sure that we get the invitations out to everybody who has participated in those in the past.
Wonderful. So we have about a little less than 15 minutes and the questions keep rolling in. I am doing my best to speak concisely and quickly. So Kim Gavin says CIA started a new program called CIA Labs to recruit and retain technical talent by offering incentives to those who work there. Under the new initiative, CIA officers will be able for the first time to publicly file patents, it's exciting, on the intellectual property they work on. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So actually, again, going back to my days in ORD, Office of Research and Development, we did have patents that were developed and filed. It was such an exciting time. And it's not that that went away, but ORD, Research and Development, was dispersed throughout the organization. It is great to see that the CIA has stood up its own lab and to look at those type of technologies that we can incorporate into our mission space. And so to maybe back to the future, you know, in terms of how we used to accomplish those and invite that back into our space. It's very exciting. We're looking forward to that.
That is, I was not aware of that. Very encouraging. So no INSA webinar would be complete without a question about security clearances. So Sherry Tulia asked, it's so hard to get a CIA clearance with a full scope poly, and there is a shortage of employees who can work on CI contracts. Can the agency speed up its clearance process so industry can support the agency more effectively? Thank you, Sherry.
Yes, that is such a great question, and I'm so appreciative to that being asked. So one of the thoughts that came out, or not, it was something that we have been working on in terms of the classification of our requirements, and perhaps maybe overclassification that require the top secret clearances. We are looking at how our requirements are being classified and reducing the classification, which will then reduce the need for top secret clearances. So yes, there is a backlog within our clearance division for our industrial partners. We're working very closely with clearance division on prioritizing those, but more importantly, maybe reducing the number of required clearances if we could reduce the classification. So perhaps we don't need TS ISSA, perhaps we can get by with unclassified until the requirements are introduced into our space, or even a secret clearance, which is much faster. So where we're definitely re-looking at if a requirement absolutely needs to be at the TS ISSA, so be it. But if it can be reduced and done at a lower level, we're trying to encourage that and work with our mission partners to affect it.
I like that forward-leaning plan. And so Sherry and all of our attendees, INSA has a Security Policy Reform Council that meets monthly. If you're an INSA member, my email address is on the website. Reach out to me and I can get you engaged as we work with the private and public sector on issues relating to security clearances. So Ken Dash says, thank you for joining us today. With the rise of the cloud, many vendors now offer SaaS solutions that run in a cloud such as AWS or Azure and are procured via a consumption-based pricing model. Can you please describe the agency's current or future procurement approaches to support a consumption-based model? Thank you, Ken.
Yes, so as we talked about earlier, Suzanne, we did award our cloud follow-on contract, our cloud to enterprise, yes. C2E.
In a record time frame.
In a record amount of time, yes. We have the unclassified fabric up and running. We are looking to get our classified fabric also up and running. It is currently going through accreditation. But once those are fully functional, we will be looking at those type of applications as a service and consumption to incorporate them into our portfolio. So I would encourage to contact me if anybody is interested in participating as a provider in our cloud environment. Our CIO, you probably have had her, Julianne,
yes.
as one of your speakers, and she and I have a great partnership in being forward-leaning and bringing those new technologies and services into our portfolio.
Right. And again, I never miss the opportunity to promote an upcoming INSA event, but at our new IC Empowering Women Engaging Men Symposium in July, Julianne and her sister are going to join me on the final day for a fireside chat. So
fantastic.
For that, you all can ask your questions of Julianne in July. It's on our website. So Robbie Mannerman asks, what do you see as the OPE's and the agency's greatest challenge in the near future and opportunity?
Our greatest challenge is recruiting, retaining the workforce that we need to get the job done. We're doing a great job at recruiting and hiring, but it's never enough. And our contracting officers, we hire such great talent that other mission components often steal our people away from us. So we absolutely have to be at the forefront of keeping pace with staffing challenges. And then the other one would be technology. So doing away with manual processing, looking at electronic solutions, again, reducing multiple entries to single entry, and getting away from paper to a paperless environment. So challenges are in those two areas. Opportunities is that from an agency standpoint, we have great relationships across the enterprise, and not only are we a mission enabler, but we're absolutely a mission partner in executing those requirements across the organization.
So out with the fax machine. So I'm going to butcher this next individual's name, but I do appreciate them including it. Bali Ambagokar asked, does the CIA use or have plans to use the GSA Highly Adaptable Cybersecurity Service, or HACS contract, for acquiring cybersecurity services in the future?
We are aware of the GSA for many years. We have leveraged comparisons with what's on GSA schedule. Typically, because of our requirements and the timeliness of how we execute, we tend not to use the GSA execution vehicles, and we typically will execute our own. So requirements may be similar, but the way they are utilized and the timeliness to deliver may be a little bit different. And so we like to, I wouldn't say we like to have control over that process, but there are usually unique aspects that are introduced into ours that may be a little bit different than what GSA provides on their schedule.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So Gloria Jordan asks, does CIA have special acquisition authorities given its unique role in understanding clandestine activities? If so, what should industry know about these authorities in order to better engage the agency?
So we do have special authorities. It's in the CIA Act of 1947. Predominantly, it is to protect sources and methods. That gives us our unique authorities. But your audience should be comfortable in knowing that we follow the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, to the maximum extent practicable. And when we need to deviate for mission reasons or sources, protecting sources and methods, then we use those special authorities. But for the most part, we follow the FAR to the greatest extent, and our deviations are few and far between.
So we have about 3 minutes left. I told you it flies by. So no conversation with CIA would be complete without a question from Charlie Allen. Charlie, great to hear from you. He wants to know about Director Burns stating technology is one of his highest priorities. What is the agency doing to reach out to Silicon Valley and other centers of excellence? Charlie, thank you for that question.
Charlie, thank you for that question. And I don't know if you remember me, but I was a young CEO back in the day who supported one of your programs. So it's so great to have you dialed in. Yes, technology is, as I mentioned, one of the director's priorities. We do have an outpost out at Silicon Valley. Our DDI organization has leveraged that outpost. And looking at, again, the latest and greatest and state-of-the-art technologies that are being produced out there and how those can be incorporated into our organization. The DDI is leveraging that, but so is the S&T. And so are some of the other component directorates, to include the Directorate of Support. How do we do distribution, and how do we logistics and so forth? So again, where we have had a lot of, I won't say necessarily manual, but old processes done the way we've always done it, it is looking to improve and enhance.
Great. So a final question, and it's along the vein of innovation, from Lee Watson. Lee wants to know, are there opportunities for CRADAs and other innovation vehicles with CIA labs? Thanks, Lee.
So we don't, we have done CRADAs in the past. We use them when we need to. There's authorities that go along with CRADAs, but we have other vehicles that we put in place that are similar to CRADAs with other partners in industry. So I encourage anybody who would be interested in those type of agreements to reach out to me, and certainly we can put them in touch with the S&T, who are the primary owners of those type of vehicles.
So Margaret, I can't thank you enough for your time today, for being so candid and accessible. You've made the morning a joy for me. It's probably the highlight of my day. We had a question from Jetta Breslow who said, could you please repeat your email address? And I'm going to ask folks to wait and maybe email you on Monday so you can get through your small business event on Friday first. So could you repeat that email?
I'm happy to. It's M as in Mary, A-R, G as in George, A, V as in Victor, A, M-A-R-G-A-V-A @ ucia.gov.
Great. Well, thank you. And I wanted to say we would love to see you in person. In July, INSA, I mentioned, is hosting our new IC Empowering Women and Engaging Men Symposium. And we are fairly certain we will have an outdoor networking event during that week. So I hope to see some new faces and some familiar faces in July, if not before. And enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Suzanne.
Were greatly appreciated. And once again, I would like to thank Mantech. Looking ahead, tomorrow we are virtually road tripping to Huntsville, Alabama, where FBI Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber, Tanya Ugaritz, will be giving a keynote, and we will also follow that keynote with a panel of folks from the Huntsville community to talk about developing a cleared workforce and more. And then next Tuesday, Melancy Harris, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism, will join us for a coffee and conversation. On June 1, we will host Melissa Smyslova, Acting Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis at DHS. And then, as I mentioned earlier, on June 8th and 9th, we will be hosting our inaugural 8A National Security Showcase. This virtual program will provide a forum for selected 8A companies to present brief capability overviews for their innovative national security technologies, applications, and services. And key public-private sector decision makers and potential private sector partners will be engaged in this event as well. And finally, on June 16th, we will host a leadership luncheon with NR Director Christopher Scalise. We have many more announcements coming in the days ahead, including the William Oliver Baker Dinner in September. You can find the full lineup of our virtual events on our website. And I would just ask, when the webinar ends, you'll see a short survey pop up. Please share your thoughts and feedback on other speakers you'd like to hear from. And this concludes today's program. Stay safe and healthy and enjoy your Tuesday.